All right.
Okay, hi everybody. What a nice group. Hi Nia. I feel like there should be a vacation just called Nia's Smile. I just was like, oh, I feel better already after a very long day. I just want to let you know too, at the very end of our time together, my very rambunctious child may wander through the frame, so don't be alarmed. I might look alarmed, but don't be alarmed on our behalf. My name is Esther Robinson. I use she, her pronouns. It's funny now that I have art build, I always feel really weird with doing my intros. I actually, I consider myself a change agent who is agnostic about medium. So I have a lot of different ways that my change agendas show up. Currently, I have an organization as a medium, and that's a very new thing for me. People take that much more seriously. And they tend to give you more money and stuff, which has been really interesting. But in order to understand kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing, I actually need to start outside of that organization, right? So I come to arts and culture both as an artist. I'm a filmmaker and a film producer. I work primarily in the documentary space. But I've also, as part of my change agenda, done a lot of stabilization work around experimental media, primarily. I've produced television, I've produced films as an artist and as a producer. And about, oh my God, so long ago, in like 1999, I started this crazy thing where I was the first hire at the Creative Capital Foundation, which was built as a intervention to stabilize artists nationally. Our focus was funding individuals around content, innovative content and form. It did this interesting thing where we married professional development and cash. And I think what's germane to our conversation today is I began to see at that point the incredible importance of non-financial assistance for artists, or financial assistance with direction or assistance in terms of creating a context that was art specific or artist specific. I spent 7 years building that from the ground up with Ruby Lerner, who was the founder. And then towards the tail end of that change agenda, I became quite disillusioned with the mechanism of grant making as a cultural intervention. And I say that because I was charged with overseeing film, video, and performing arts for the nation. I would view about 2,000 proposals a cycle personally, and we would choose about 20. We created a pretty amazing process for that was inclusive of the panel, and I felt very good about the many diversities we could bring to the formal intervention. But the truth was, those numbers can never create a diverse slate that really reflects America and American artistic ideals. So I had some concerns about that, but then also this idea of what is innovation and what is innovation, how is that culturally derived, right? So a lot of questions I began having on the artistic front had to do with how different cultural traditions were read. I think a good example would be we had a Native American basket maker who was very seemingly at the forefront of a 3,000-year tradition, but the specialization to actually be able to read that resume or to read that work, we could do that, and we did try to do that, but what else were we missing, right? That was sort of obvious, right? But what other forms of cultural tradition or innovation within that context were missed? And I began to ask myself, how could I support culture in a way that was actually quality agnostic? Which is to say, I wanted to find a way to just say, we're here to support culture. Culture has a lot of meanings. Artists are a lot of different things. They come in a lot of different shapes and forms. And what would it look like to say, quality isn't my job? It's not to determine its quality or its relevancy or its importance, but how could I just create support systems? And that led to my interest in asset building. I'm going to try to blow through this. Apologies, this is so long. And asset building became the intervention I became most interested in. So after Creative Capital, I founded an organization called Art Home, and that change agenda was all around helping artists build assets and equity. And at the same time, looking at interventions that also stabilized other neighbors and other neighborhoods, because I felt like focusing only on artists was a mistake, and that actually we should only focus on the places where you can help artists and help everyone else simultaneously. That siphoning someone off because they were special but had no interest to me. Yep. So it was through that body of work that I came to come to be at Art Built. I merged Art Home with another organization called Artopolis to do this project. This project came out of a intermediary project called Art Built Mobile Studios. So me and the other partner had been doing artist residency programs in New York City parks and plazas. This work still continues. We built a mobile studio. It's like a tiny house, but without a bathroom and without a sink, because in New York, if you put a bathroom and a sink in, you can't get a permit to be anywhere. So we built this tiny house. And so we were really interested in mobile architecture. We were really interested in affordable architecture. And this intervention actually is only legally permittable in New York City as an art project. So we created an art project around it. We do this residency thing. That's been going on now we're on our 5th year. I can talk forever about that, but I won't, but it's a really juicy project. And from that project, we started thinking about, well, what would it mean to scale this up? What if we had a fleet of these? What if we put artists in these? And I realized I didn't know anything about commercial real estate. I knew a lot about home buying and asset building from an individual perspective, but not for commercial leasing. And so we did a research project where we followed, there's a lot of displacement currently happening in industrial Brooklyn and Queens, all over industrial New York. In my personal neighborhood of 20 years, we've been seeing a massive level of displacement. And so a building by my house, literally 2 blocks from my house, was being emptied. Probably 900 to maybe 1,500 individuals and artists and businesses were being displaced. And I decided to follow 2 sets of people. One set was a fully organized, not really a collective, but they had been working in a studio space that they had rented and built out themselves. They were on their 2nd 10-year lease. So very, very organized. They knew from the beginning they needed a long-term lease. They fought hard, they built it out themselves, they pulled together the resources for that. And when the building was sold and everyone was evicted, they sued the landlord and they got a chunk of change, right? They're that level together. So I'm following them, they're gonna be my control group. And then we're also following a set of individual artists who are gonna just have to figure it out on their own in the market. And the individual artists were sort of able to solve, but most of them were finding sort of temporary spaces, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. But the thing that sort of transformed my work over the last few years was that the organized artists, and when I say it, so most of these artists are teaching artists very high level. They're teaching at, the major institutions, or they're performing at gallery level. They're making work that's being sold. They're not famous. They're not rich, but they're serious, show up, really do the work people. And they were not finding a space. So my first instinct, because I'm arrogant, was that they were making a mistake. No, that's not flattering, right? That's terrible to say, but I have to say that. So I was like, I'm coming with you. I'm gonna come with you to these meetings. So I started going with them. I saw over 30 buildings during a 2-week process with this group. And what became apparent, and I'm not gonna belabor this, but I'm just gonna summarize it. We uncovered a massive industrial business space crisis that was hidden in 2 ways. And I think it's similar to Boston. A lot of sort of all major real estate contested cities have this, which is that extractive capitalism has discovered affordable space, and it's like a mine. It's like a gold mine, right? And you mine the gold, and the gold is affordability. Because they find if it's cheap and they can jack their rent, they can make this thing called profit in that distance. And so affordable space is something that tranched international real estate companies are interested in investing in to destroy. Right? Mm-hmm. So we uncover this, and I've never done space production. And so I go, there's a bunch of people in New York City, like space works, a bunch of organizations whose job it is to do this. And I run around really alarmed. I make the commissioner of New York City see me, the arts commissioner. I go to all these meetings. I'm like, the sky is falling. But the thing is that it's not falling because everyone's displaced right now, which is what's interesting. What's impending is that we're seeing what I would call workplace instability, which is that the lease terms have shrunk from, used to be 10, 15 years were quite routine. Now we're seeing 3 years, 1 year, which is a signal that the landlords, are thinking they're gonna flip these buildings. They don't wanna have tenancy for that long because they don't know what they're gonna do with the building, right? But also it means that if you're gonna build out a studio space, you're never gonna recoup the investment that you put down. And even if you decide you wanted to stay and you could recoup the investment, the landlord may look at your studio space and think, oh, what a great office space. So those are the 2. And so in talking about why, and then I'll promise I'll open it up for or give you a little bit about Art Built, and then we can open up for discussion. the conditions that we are seeing in New York City is that it's much, much, much more lucrative to flip an industrial space into a WeWork or to empty it and hold it with the thought that the zoning might change to residential. So we're seeing these major players enter the workplace. They're getting $600 a desk for the WeWork spaces. Now, again, this is not even real. They are not actually getting $600 a desk. They aren't filling these spaces. Right. But the international real estate companies don't care. This is all speculation, and this is all about actually borrowing money for some future use of a building and maybe or maybe not actually delivering on that promise, right? So it's really about, like, one of the big industrial players in my neighborhood just got a $30 million 3% loan from the Bank of China, right? So it's like ill-gotten gains, public assets were stripped out of another country, ported over to this country, given at 3%. It's just stolen money making money. Nobody actually cares what happens. It's being parked. So this is happening at scale in my city. I go to all the people that are supposed to be doing this work. Nobody actually is moving. And so I do this thing, which happens to me every once in a while, which is I totally lose my temper and I'm like, screw it, I'm doing it myself. So what we did is I just did a crash course and trying to figure out the marketplace, figure out where the price points were, where the breaks were, how you could get affordability, what it could look like. My initial concept, and I did this with Guy Buckles, who's my co-executive director, and he had built something called the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts. So when the Times says we're the largest in 20 years, the one that was 20 years ago was his, right? So he's built the last two big ones. And so I felt like because of his expertise, I have confidence that we could do the construction management, which is something I'd never done before. But I had to learn very quickly, like, what is this world? So our first thought was to talk the biggest industrial commercial broker into representing us for free. And this is closed circuit. So I know that we're taping this, but this part should not be public. This is just for our edification. This is for education. But my first thought was that
I'm going to record it. I'm going to stop recording.
We're going to pause the recording.
Okay, great.